Nia Wilson. Say her name, remember her name, and respect her name. You would think that in the face of unimaginable tragedy, following these practices would be instinctive. You would think that, but unfortunately, far too often in the United States, many in the media look for ways to dehumanize the black victims of tragedy. And it has to stop. On Thursday, protesters gathered outside the Fox affiliate KTVU, the Oakland-based news station that earlier this week covered the story by using this photo of Nia Wilson. In the picture, Nia appears to be holding a gun, which was later identified as a phone case. But regardless of whether she was holding a gun or not, the question is why KTVU chose to use this photo. The answer from KTVU was, it was a mistake. But as we know, history shows this is a mistake that happens all too often with black victims. Like when, say, New York Post described Timothy Coleman as a career criminal after he was ruthlessly attacked and killed by a white supremacist. Oh, a white supremacist who was described then by the same newspaper as dapper but deadly. Or the descriptions of Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin in the New York Times. And sometimes it's not just the victim who's smeared by the mainstream media. When Fox News covered Philando Castile's death, Sean Hannity thought it appropriate, to begin his coverage of an officer pumping 7 rounds into a car with a child present by questioning the actions of Diamond Reynolds, who videotaped the horrific encounter.
A woman is with her boyfriend. He's shot by the policeman, and she's live FaceTiming this thing to the world. How about helping the person that's been shot?
Yeah, you can always count on Sean to talk about the woman who was calm and composed in the face of a belligerent officer rather than talk about said belligerent officer. And we know that the inverse is also true. White terrorists or mass shooters are reflexively humanized and shown in shades of grey. Am I lying? Are they not often portrayed as troubled kids?
It is the outcry of a very challenged young man talking about challenges in his personal life.
Or loners who drifted off the track? Please, prove me wrong if you beg to differ. Faced with this history, the black community has every right to discard KTVU's apology because it's the same apology they've heard time and time again, all while the same mistakes continue to happen time and time again. And the thing is, there may well have been no malice intended, no underlying intent to make Nia out to be anything less than the bright young girl with her whole future ahead of her. But when viewed through a historical lens, and considering the fact that images of the killer, like this, have all but been ignored by the same news source, you have to ask these questions. Because here is the difference, and listen close. Those who live in a bubble, hell-bent on convincing themselves that prejudice like this doesn't exist, will look at this example and immediately deflect to cries of, not everything's about race, or why are you virtue signaling? To protect themselves from asking these questions, to protect themselves from having to unlearn practices that they have become accustomed to. Practices like accepting the smearing of black victims as just straightforward news coverage. But those of us who are consciously combating this kind of prejudice need to ask these questions and hold sources like KTVU accountable. Questions like that posed by Anne Hathaway, who was then inundated by an enormous amount of hate because she dared bring up that Voldemort of the right wing, white privilege. Nia Wilson was a young woman with her life ahead of her. That's the image the news media should have been showing us from the moment her life was taken by evil. It's not difficult, people, but it does mean confronting some difficult truths and then being willing to change.